what I love so much about rescue mission work is what I've seen rescue missions really maybe more so than anywhere else I've ever been is the ability a rescue mission has to see the dignity and the value of every single person that walks through their door. Most of the time, we get the privilege of serving individuals that society has said all hope is lost, and rescue missions in an extraordinary way see value and then do everything they can to help that individual live into who God created them to be.
Welcome to the Miracle Hill podcast, where we share raw stories and have honest conversations that display the anatomy of God's grace here at Miracle Hill Ministries. We hope that these conversations uplift, encourage, inspire, and deepen your walk of faith, and expand your compassion for the last, the least, and the lost. Welcome back to the Miracle Hill podcast. In this episode, Ryan and I talk with Brandan Thomas, Director of Leadership, Learning, and Program at CityGate Network, about why rescue missions matter. We discuss what a rescue mission is, who they serve, and why they meet an important need both nationally and locally. Without further ado, let's hop into the conversation. Brandan, once again, welcome to the show. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yep. So Brandan Thomas, I'm the Director of Leadership, Learning, and Programs for CityGate Network. I am also the lucky guy that gets to be married to Casey, and I got three beautiful kids. My 13-year-old starts middle school tomorrow, or starts 8th grade tomorrow. So last year of middle school, which means next year I'm going to have a high schooler, which is wild. So Xander is my 13-year-old. I've got a 9-year-old, Judah, who started 4th grade yesterday. And then our little princess, Jax Marie, who started 2nd grade yesterday. And so I am one lucky dude who gets to hang out with those cool people all the time, for sure.
That's awesome. Brandan, can you tell us a little bit about your relationship with Rescue Mission Ministries?
Yeah. So for the last 18 years, we're leading up to 2022, I was a pastor of a local church. I spent a little time as a youth pastor prior to that. But in that time, I had the privilege of serving on the board of directors for the Winchester Rescue Mission. And that led to me becoming the interim director of the Winchester Rescue Mission, which then actually led into me becoming their CEO. I had the privilege of serving there for 8 years and watched our mission transform from still a smaller mission, but transformed from a mission that really wasn't able to do much in the community because of financial constraints and just didn't have much leadership to now probably one of the largest nonprofits in the community that's serving and innovating in a great way. And so I had the privilege of doing that prior to coming on here at CityGate. I got connected with CityGate in 2018. And that for me helped me really dive into rescue ministry and how to better serve individuals experiencing homelessness and stuck in the throes of addiction and poverty related issues.
Sort of just to help our listeners, could you tell us a little bit about what CityGate is and like how it assists rescue missions throughout the United States?
So CityGate Network, formerly known as the Association of Gospel Rescue Missions, started in 1906 to work with rescue missions that were, seeking to serve those most in need in the communities in which they served. And so the network began in 1906 with the idea in mind to help resource and connect those missions with help with government policies as well as best practices and how to better utilize and learn from each other to move forward the poverty alleviation in the community that they serve. And so we've been around since 1906, doing just that, working alongside rescue missions like Miracle Hill to grab a hold of best practices as well as help resource them with kind of what's best, what was the best method of that community and other communities to serve those stuck in addiction, overcoming poverty issues, and just all the different things that you see happening in rescue missions.
That's great. How do you know Ryan Dirk, our CEO?
Oh man. So a few years ago, I got a phone call from the former CEO of CityGate who said, we need somebody to be the vice president of the Bluegrass District. And so CityGate divides rescue missions into districts. And so it just happened to be the Bluegrass District. I was the CEO of the Winchester Rescue Mission in Virginia at the time. And so I got asked to be the vice president of the district, and the president of the district just happened to be Ryan. And so, long story short, connected with Ryan there. And I hope it's safe to say that Ryan and I became really good friends. At least I'll say this: he's a guy that, from the moment I met him and have had the privilege of working alongside him, is a guy that I've looked up to and learned a lot from, of how to better serve the community that I was called to serve at that time. And so, I guess from that moment on, as I've seen who Ryan is, I've watched what Ryan's done. He's not. I wouldn't only say that he's a friend. I would say he's a mentor and somebody that I truly look up to and respect in a lot of ways.
Before we got on here, Michael asked me how we knew each other. And I don't know that I gave him as good of an answer as you did. But what I did say is that, there's a few people in the country that, do this kind of work or in this lane that I feel like are kindred spirits. And I've always felt that way about you, that we think alike as far as like, what are the solutions to these very challenging issues? We think alike and understand the Lord's commitment to these issues and like where this is in the heart of God. And man, it's made it really easy to be buddies with you on top of that.
Yeah, man, I couldn't agree more. Ryan, for me, is the kind of guy that we can go, a span of time without talking or seeing each other, but the moment we do, it's like we didn't spend any time apart. We weren't disconnected. We just pick right up where we left off, for sure. Yeah. So man, it truly is a privilege to call you a friend.
Great. Me too.
That's great. Today we really wanted to dive into the concept of rescue missions altogether. And so we've kind of pointed this conversation around what a rescue mission is and why they exist and why they're necessary and who they help. So Brandan, if you don't mind, like what is a rescue mission? Why do we need rescue missions? And what do rescue missions offer for those who are experiencing homelessness?
Sure. So what a rescue mission is what's in the name, right? It's a rescue mission. The idea of a rescue mission is a place for people who are most broken, most in need in a community, to end up where they have the opportunity to be met right where they are, regardless of their addiction issues, regardless of their mental health state, their poverty state, whatever. It doesn't matter. They can show up at the doors of a rescue mission and be welcomed in with the opportunity to have their life radically transformed, not only by having their physical needs met, but also their spiritual needs met. And so our rescue missions across the country meet people where they are, not only with the life transformation message of the gospel, but also meet them where they are with all of the physical needs that they might show up with. So we watch missions who serve individuals who walk through the doors with severe addiction issues. We watch them serve individuals who walk through with severe mental illness. We watch them serve individuals who are fleeing domestic violence, sexual assault, sex trafficking. The list goes on of the different ways our rescue missions across the country serve individuals at their biggest time of need, their most gut-wrenching need. Again, we could probably fill this time with, gut-wrenching story after gut-wrenching story of rescue missions who have served in somebody's biggest time of need, to not just meet that immediate need, but watch them build the opportunity for life transformation where everything from that moment on is transformed for them. We've watched people go from barely surviving to thriving in big ways, just as Ryan's story, for sure.
Right. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah. So why rescue missions? So
Yeah.
let me tell a quick anecdote. So years ago, I was in my ordination council, and I'm surrounded by these amazing godly men, right? And they're hammering me with these heavy theological questions for hours. And towards the end of it, this man that I just value more than I can put into words, he asked me a question. He said, what scripture would you point to support the ministry of Miracle Hill? And I froze, and I was so deeply embarrassed and ashamed. So I went on this quest, right? To what does the Bible say about this? And so I'm gonna point to kind of two ideas within it. Certainly from an Acts 1:8 perspective, right? Like, where are we supposed to be Jesus to the world? And the passage specifically says Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the ends of the earth. But when you ask the local church today, where are missions? They point to the ends of the earth 90% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
When, Brandon pointed to the name Rescue Mission, right? Like, that's not, I think that was lost on me prior to kind of doing the study, that the people that work within rescue missions are by default missionaries.
Right.
They are there to be Jesus to the world. And if we're not taking care of Jerusalem, right? Like, I feel like there's some intentionality in that order. If we're not taking care of Jerusalem, then, I don't know about going to the rest. Now, somebody who's into foreign missions is going to argue with me that they're called to foreign missions, and I can't argue back, right?
Right.
Like, certainly you are. But a rescue mission is a Christian call to serve the least and the lost locally. So that's the first idea. The second idea, you can't read the Bible and escape the fact that caring for people is the most important thing to God. And he puts a premium on people who can't care for themselves, whether it is in Deuteronomy about not abusing the poor people, or it's in Matthew talking about whatever you've done unto the least of these, you've done unto me, right? Like, this is something that is central to the idea of being Jesus to the world. Brandon and I would both subscribe to an idea of non-toxic charity in that we were going to give a hand up, not just a hand out, but it is a Christian responsibility to give that hand up, right? It's not a suggestion, right? It is a commandment to love your neighbor. It is a commandment to care for the least of these. And that's why rescue missions exist.
Yeah.
To fill that duty required by all of us who know Jesus.
What I love so much about rescue mission work is what I've seen rescue missions, really maybe more so than anywhere else I've ever been, is the ability a rescue mission has to see the dignity and the value of every single person that walks through their door. Most of the time, we get the privilege of serving individuals that society has said all hope is lost, and rescue missions in an extraordinary way see value and then do everything they can to help that individual live into who God created them to be. And that's one of my favorite parts of the whole thing. I also see rescue missions as not separate from the local church, but I see rescue missions as an incredible partner to the local church. When you read the story of the Good Samaritan, if you notice, when the Good Samaritan meets the individual who's in their greatest time of need, the Good Samaritan does something pretty spectacular and serves right there with the immediate need that the individual has, but then does something I would say that's probably even more extraordinary, but makes a long-term investment by getting that individual to an inn where he could get longer, more sustained care. And what I see rescue missions doing is not, separate from the local church, but in concert with the local church, in that we provide a space for the local church to take somebody who is in a great need that's going to take long-term attention to be able to get better. The rescue mission is there for the church to connect individuals to long-term sustained care, so they can live into the life transformation that God will work in their heart.
What would you say is the secret sauce to how a rescue mission functions or works? Or is there a secret sauce? Does it look different for each one, or how does that work?
Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, yeah, so I would, this past year at our conference, we had the privilege of hearing from Dr. Lisa Miller, who is she's not a follower of Christ. She's a professor from Columbia University. She did a study on spirituality. We would say that it's all rooted in Jesus, but ultimately her whole study from Columbia University was in regards to the role that faith plays in recovery and in overcoming traumatic situations and things like that. And so what I would say the secret sauce to rescue missions is the way that we point to Jesus. We recognize that we can meet all the physical needs an individual has, but if we don't address the spiritual need that they have, which is rooted in who Jesus is and what his message was that brings ultimate life transformation, we would probably not see the success that we see. I believe the secret sauce to rescue missions is Jesus Christ. He is the one that brings the ultimate life transformation. We just get to be a part in assisting the work that Jesus is ultimately doing in someone's heart.
So I've got this thought that's rattling around my head, Brandon. I've been working on this idea for several weeks. So I'm going to throw it at you and let you respond to it. So you remember the old kind of mental exercise, what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so using that premise, in rescue missions, I feel like the unstoppable force is patience. Like it's the patience that Jesus has in his ministry, right? Like he's never in a rush. He's always intentional. There's not an end to his patience. And the immovable object is God's holiness. Okay. Like we don't get to move that, right? No matter what we do, no matter how patient we are with people that are doing incredibly unsafe things or silly things or stupid things, we don't get to change who God is, right? Like he is who he is. And Jesus is able to live at the juncture of those two ideas, right? This unstoppable patience, which gets to that secret sauce idea, right? Like I completely agree with you. Jesus is the secret sauce, but what does that look like? It looks like non-judgmental, extremely patient community. Right? It's the guy who comes to the front door for the 15th time and we smile at him and say, man, it is so good to see you. Welcome back. We're excited that you're here, and mean it. Like not just say it, but actually mean it. That is that unstoppable patience. But at the end of the day, we represent a holy God. And that is part of the equation too. And living in the tension between those two ideas seems to be the secret sauce, right? It's where Jesus lives in ministry to the least of these.
Man, I think you have your next book already lined out right there. That's great stuff. I mean, that's exactly it. So most of the folks that we get the privilege of working with come to the mission almost believing that nobody cares about them and nobody's capable of caring about them. So sometimes there's not a real desire to change because they don't think they're worthy of that change. And the beauty of what happens in a rescue mission, because we all know that, we all know that Jesus almost, when you go back and you think about the beginning of time, I I think when God created us, because God has foreknowledge, he knew that he was going to need to redeem us because we were going to mess the whole thing up, right? There was an expectation that we were going to mess it up because he created us with free will. And what I love about rescue missions is we have the opportunity to live that out every day, knowing that the individuals that we get the privilege of working with are going to mess up. They're going to do things that we wish they wouldn't do because we've all done things that we wish we wouldn't have done. And yet we get to love them regardless. We get to meet them where they are regardless. We get to, when I served as the director of the rescue mission, somebody would go on a bender, they would blow up their recovery, come back. And, oftentimes that meant they got to meet with me and we would sit down and talk, and they would almost every time without fail say, Brandon, I'm so sorry I let you down. And I can't believe I did that. And I would just get to respond back exactly the way that I picture Jesus responds back to me when I do stupid stuff. They say, well, the good news is you weren't holding me up. Here's the thing. I love you anyways. I care about you anyways. I'm excited for you anyways, because here's what I believe. If you're not dead, God's not done, and we get to watch him do some incredible things moving forward. So let's take the step today to move forward and learn from the silly mistakes that we've made in the past. And so what I am excited about, what I love watching happen is that exact thing. The secret sauce is that life transformation. We love you anyways. Why? Because Jesus loved us anyways. We know that this recovery journey is going to be tough. We know you're going to make a lot of mistakes in this journey, but the difference is we're still going to love you, because most people, their experience in life is the love that they've experienced is conditional. As long as you do these things, then you get to be part of the family. As long as you do these things, you get to be, one of the questions I get asked regularly is, what's the number one cause of homelessness? And, we can pontificate right now about the number one cause, but I would tell you the number one cause of homelessness simply is broken relationships. Everybody who walks through our doors has experienced the ultimate loss of relationship, because if it wasn't for the ultimate loss of relationships, they wouldn't end up in a place where they needed somewhere to stay. They walk through our doors with no relationships because all the relationships they've experienced have been conditional. As long as you do these things, we love you. In our work, we get to do what Jesus has done for us, which is say, regardless of what you've done, we love you. And because we love you, we're going to lean in to what it looks like for you to experience life transformation at an ultimate level.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it's not just a matter of just pointing to Jesus and being Jesus, but it's also the pace of Jesus too, like slowly, methodically walking with someone. There's this really fantastic book called The 3 Mile an Hour God. And it talks about how Jesus, he walked, right? He walked everywhere from point A to point B. And the discipleship happened in that period of walking. And when we walk with someone, it's often taxing and it's sometimes painful and it takes a long time, but that's the role of the ministry, is to slowly walk with someone into their recovery. That's really beautiful. Brandon, you've read Ryan's book, Counterfeit Peace. How is it descriptive of the work that happens in rescue missions every day?
First of all, if I could say this, man, this was a tough book to read, mainly because I know Ryan. And when I started this book out and I started just seeing who Ryan was before Jesus got a hold of his life, and right after they transformed it, it really, I remember sitting at my desk, I was reading, I got through the first few chapters and I just had to put it down and just take a minute, because the only thought I had was, I wish I knew Ryan then, man. I wish I could have just, jumped in and just loved him through that journey. So what I love about this book is the fact that, first of all, Ryan is so raw with his journey. Most folks are not that raw with their journey. Most folks, so I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, which means I like to jump right to the good stuff. I like to, I don't like to sit in the tough stuff. And what I loved about Ryan was, in order for us to see the beautiful work that Jesus has done in his life, he was very revealing of what his life was like prior to Jesus doing the beautiful work in his life. The authenticity of that is incredible. It also shows this great picture because Ryan takes us on his journey at Miracle Hill. Ryan takes us on the journey of, the moments that he got it right, the moments he got it wrong, but the way that the community came around him and how even through his journey he found purpose. And so that's one of the beautiful things I love really about this the whole book was how Ryan took us on a full journey of how he got to where he was and how Jesus radically transformed his life, and then how he was able to use those broken things in his life to serve other people. And even in that, he shares, the struggles that he had while working. And, when he starts talking about, losing individuals that he was counseling and things like that, like he's still very raw in sharing even the journey working in a rescue mission, and gives us this, I really an incredible behind the scenes look at the life transformation that happens every day at Miracle Hill and missions just like Miracle Hill across the country. Like he gives us a true in-depth look at the behind the scenes of not only somebody in recovery, but somebody working in recovery ministry. So it's, man, hats off. I loved every bit of it, even the stuff that really ripped my heart out.
There's a lot of like common themes amongst people experiencing homelessness and going through recovery. Now, obviously, people are different as well, but what do you think are some of the common themes and issues that guests of rescue missions share? Either one of you can take that one first if you want.
Well, Brandon's got the national view, so I don't think my view's any different, but let's hear what he says.
Let's hear the national view.
Well, I mean, the common themes goes back to what we said just a little bit ago in that broken relationship thing, right? So there's this emptiness that's come in. There's this shame, this guilt, this worthlessness that people begin to feel. I will often talk about this. I've when you go to like a high school, and all of us did an exercise in high school, which is, what do you want to be when you grow up? What are your dreams? You built these vision boards. What I've never seen is somebody say, I want to end up completely broken on the streets and, addicted. I've never seen somebody put that as their life ambition. But what happens is something happens, whether it's a sickness and a mental illness, an injury, despair, loss, death, like, Ryan experienced with his mom, like all of these things happen. And so we turn to something to comfort us. And when we don't have good, healthy relationship, sometimes we turn to substance, whatever, and we end up in this place where we're lost. And in that journey, what happens is shame and guilt and even this sense of worthlessness comes into play. And oftentimes what happens is, well, nobody cares, then I don't care. And so you begin to do this thing where you live day to day, not thinking of what the future might be. So you just live, how do I get through today? And how do I numb the pain today? And that seems to be the thread that I've seen the most throughout the country, is this loss of hope, this loss of a desire that I'm worth anything more than just getting through today. And if I can get through today without feeling pain, then we'll figure it out tomorrow.
Would you say that's a shared reality on a like a local level?
Yeah, I certainly think it is. I think that we can add in statistical commonalities like addiction or mental health or an inability to traverse very broken systems that exist in our society. All that is also common and themes. I think that the one thing that I want to add on top of what Brandon says is it's never as simple to escape as it appears from the outside.
Right.
There's always 50 more steps that you don't see. So the old school thinking, and this kind of gets into the next question you have on our sheet here. The old school thinking is, just go get a job and it'll fix it. But it's never that simple.
Right.
And there's always pieces to that puzzle that you don't understand. from a very surface level external perspective.
Right. Yeah, there seems to be a lot of shifts in not just how we see this whole issue of homelessness and recovery, but just things have changed in the past few decades. What has changed in particular about rescue mission ministry in the recent decades that you've seen yourself, and then also just we know to be national as well?
Yeah, so I'll try to answer it, and you can tell me where I'm wrong, Brandon.
No.
So, historically, if you go back 50 years, let's say, rescue missions used to be a place that were primarily for men. Really wasn't a lot of need for rescue mission kind of beds for women, mostly men, maybe 60 years ago. People would come in and, they would show up and they would be forced to get a haircut and put on a nice pair of clothes. And then the rescue mission, from a very good perspective, don't take anything I'm saying as belittling, but the rescue mission would be extraordinarily evangelical, right?
Yeah.
Like that was the singular aim, was to love people, pray for them, pray with them, win them for Christ, and all that.
Really the mantra of soup, soap, and salvation, right?
Yeah. Soup, soap, salvation. And that still is very much alive in rescue missions today. I think that rescue missions have evolved to recognize the things that Brandon and I are pointing to, like the complexity of the issues, the complexity of human beings. And rescue missions are becoming more and more sophisticated at not just the evangelical piece, but trauma-based therapy and world-class case management. Brandon's going to give us the stat here because I don't remember it, but between rescue missions and the Salvation Army, very similar model. It's what percentage of the total
and adult and teen challenge. So we actually just did a deep dive in this, and we're not sure if this statistic is as true as we thought it might have been at one time. However, the best guess that we had during the pandemic was 75% of the rehab space, the addiction recovery space, was shared between Adult Teen Challenge, Salvation Army, and CityGate Network.
Wow. 75%.
Yeah,
Roughly,
and
yeah.
there's a chunk of rescue missions that are not in any of those three camps.
Of course, yeah.
But yeah, so that means of the 1 million people that are experiencing homelessness right now while we're talking, 750,000 of them are in one of those camps, right? And so rescue missions, they have a choice in it, but in order to be effective at this ministry the Lord's given us, rescue missions have had to evolve to face a very different world than a decade ago or 2 decades ago or 3 decades ago.
Right.
So here's how what I would kind of describe some of this too. So back up to the last question and put this question with it. The average person experiencing chronic homelessness, it takes roughly somewhere in the neighborhood of about 7 years to fall into chronic homelessness. When you think about somebody who's experiencing homelessness, that's the average person. Again, sometimes less, sometimes more. But ultimately, when somebody ends up on the trajectory to homelessness, they can couch surf, they find ways to meet. It's ultimately when they hit rock bottom, which sometimes takes 7 years. So you have 7 years of trauma, 7 years of addiction, 7 years of everything falling apart by the time somebody enters our doors. If it took 7 years to fall into that level of homelessness, we're not going to get them out with a job, right? Like that's 7 years of mental anguish, trauma, issues that has to be undone for them to be able to live a life that thrives. And so the idea of let's just find a job really just doesn't work. maybe I'll step on some toes here just for fun. But, one of my favorite things that would always happen in our mission was the folks who wanted to bring us suits for the men so they could go get jobs. And I'm like, we're so far from getting jobs. We had millions of suits, but, we also knew that it was going to take some time before we needed to give somebody a suit to go for a job interview, because we had 7 years of trauma to undo. The other thing that I would say that the reason why homelessness has changed so much is when you go back, 50s, 60s, and 70s, we had mental institutions. We had places for people who had severe mental illness to go. With us getting, away from, and for some reasons, it was good to get away from mental institutions because a lot of really bad things were happening in mental institutions. The struggle is we didn't find a system to replace that. So now, the institutions became jails, the institutions became the streets. And so all of these, individuals experiencing, severe mental illness issues were then thrown on the streets. And so rescue missions went from dealing with, a middle-aged man who had, alcohol addiction to now, the introduction of harder drugs. On top of that, people with severe mental illness who used to have a place to go now no longer have a place to go. So what's happened is rescue missions have become a place that's ended up serving individuals in that situation that, there was a time in the history where we didn't serve that individual because they had a place to go. And then on top of that, as we've watched the breakdown of the family, we're seeing more and more single moms end up homeless than ever before in our history. And so all that to say that the work that we're doing has become more complex than it ever had to be. Again, used to it was that middle-aged man coming in needing to recover from, usually alcohol abuse, and then get him a job, give him Jesus, get him clean, get him a job, and all is well. Definitely not the case any longer. It's way more complex than that. If it took 7 years to get into this, it's going to be a lot more complex than, real quick soup, soap, salvation to get out of it.
Right. So in essence, you're saying that rescue missions have had to change their models to meet the rising changes of the culture that is around us. I think you mentioned something, especially about like the breakdown of the family, and I think this leads really well into this next question. Ryan, you point towards relationships with others as a key component of your life change experience. How do you two view that as an important part of the puzzle for rescue missions and also individuals assisting those who are experiencing homelessness or going through recovery?
I mean, ultimately, if we said the number one cause of homelessness is broken relationships, then relationships going to be the key to restoration, right? And when you hear Ryan and you read through Ryan's story and how God definitely used different individuals from roommates to his wife, his kids. And I just love, man, can I just say this? I love how honest you are about all of this and your relationships and whatnot. That truly is a key role. We talk about this all the time. Jesus will change your life. Jesus is amazing, but we also need flesh and blood. We need people right in front of us that can show us Jesus and be tangible Jesus. I can't remember the name of the guy that picked you up on the road, Ryan, and when you and your son were caught in the rain.
Yeah. So what's funny about this is I changed everybody's names, right? So I'm trying to make sure I use the right name here. I think in the book I refer to them as Benji and Evelyn.
Yes, that's it. There you go. Yeah. So, I mean, like that's a perfect example, in a small way, but there's flesh and blood living their life out the way Jesus would have lived his life, right? Loving people, meeting them where they are, traversing life with them. In my mind, that's the secret sauce. That's everything about this journey is relationships. We can professionalize our services and missions. We can have all the right formulas necessary. We could do everything right and well, just like Chick-fil-A. But if we're not learning how to have relationship, if we're not entering into relationship with people, ultimately, I don't think we would see the life change that we see. It's all about love and relationship. And I know that sounds so cliche and so simple, but when you understand the population we get to serve, it's tough. Like trying to develop relationship with somebody who is used to relationships blowing up is very difficult, but it's also the very thing that really ultimately leads to life transformation.
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything to add. The people who find a healthy tribe are successful.
Yeah.
The people who don't aren't. We are not meant to be in isolation.
Yeah, that's true. That's so true. Brandan, there's so many different flavors of rescue missions across the US. They look differently, they operate differently. What are some commonalities between them, and then what are some differences? And yeah, what have you noticed since you've been with CityGate?
Yeah, so commonality, would be subscribing to Jesus in a big way as part of the success. So most, if not all, of our missions would say that Christ is the center focus for why they do what they do. And I would tell you that if that's not the case, then that mission will probably not be as successful as it is. Period. So a common thread is that. Another common thread is the desire to meet people where they are. While that might vary, in some instances, but for the most part, what I love about our missions is they don't dive into the political issues of why somebody has ended up homeless as much as they just open the door and say, "You are welcome into this place. If you have come to our door, you have a need, you are welcome." And I've watched that happen coast to coast in an epic way in almost all of our missions. Where some of them differ is, some will offer a very comprehensive recovery. Some offer, only, emergency shelter needs. Some, we even have some that don't even have overnight shelter. They have day shelters and are, meet just tangible needs like food, clothing, that kind of thing. We have missions that really are, womb to tomb in their services in every way possible. We've got some who've partnered with local hospitals and provide really incredible respite care. So for an individual who gets discharged from the hospital, who's had major surgery, major issues, but have been living on the street, can't go back to the street, but don't have anywhere else to go. We've got missions who actually have hospital beds and nursing services provided for the recovery for an individual coming out of the hospital. So that gamut, man, is far and wide, which is probably the most exciting part of my job. Is I get to go see all of this. I get to experience all this in a big way, and just see the different ways our missions are meeting the needs of their community. Because every community is different. Every community's biggest need is different, and our shelters lean into that in a big way.
Ryan, what do you think about that? I know that like Miracle Hill is kind of the exception in a lot of cases because it has such a wide breadth of things that it like basically goes after in this community. How do you feel?
Yeah, I think that I agree with everything Brandon said. There's a commonality around kind of philosophy of ministry, which, has some variation to it, but then there's a tremendous variation in what that looks like depending on the organization, the city, the population that they specifically are called to serve. And when we're healthy, we're constantly stealing from each other, right? Like we're constantly saying, "Oh man, that looks like that works over there. Let's try that over here."
Right.
And Brandon and I both very strongly believe that it is through that sharing, whether it be programmatically or outcomes data, that we make the argument for rescue missions from a national perspective.
That's certainly that seems to be one of the purposes of CityGate, really, is to sort of connect those dots and two missions who by distance or proximity might not have anything else in common, might be able to pull resources together through this shared network, and that's a really wonderful
Mhm.
aspect of it. So I noticed that the two of you both have a really wonderful grasp on the philosophy and of the ministry of rescue missions, and I know that it is certainly a little out of touch with our government's position. How is that? How is it different, and how does that impact what you do locally and nationally?
So I think it's a kind of a simple answer. I think that we would say that the solutions have to be at the crossroads of people and systems. Like you have to you have to deal with a whole person, right? Both their mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, the systems that they're interacting with, the traumas that they've experienced. And the federal position is really built on systems, right? It is fix this system to fix the problem. And I would say that you're missing half the equation.
Okay. Brandon, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I totally agree. The way I would say it is this is the approach that we're called to take is not a one size fits all. It's a one size fits one. And that's the difference between rescue missions and the federal government. The government's job is to look at this whole broken system and determine that this is the silver bullet to fix it. And the thing that we've been called to do is look and see every individual walking through the doors of our missions and say, what is it that this individual needs? And then work with them within the systems that we have to say, this is the one size that fits you.
That's certainly a little out of touch with the governmental view, as opposed to seeing systems. We're seeing people and humans first. So that's wonderful. If someone listening to this podcast wants to be a part of the solution to people's experience of homelessness, how would either of you guide them to be a part of the change they want to see in the world?
I added that question. I added the Gandhi
I
quote
like
there
it.
at the end of it. Um, um, yeah, time, talents, and treasures. Find your local rescue mission organization, and don't assume that they need something specific that you have to offer. Call them up and say, "Hey, what can I do to bless your efforts?" Whether that is with volunteering or financial support, or if you're a believer, prayer, just put yourself into the ring.
Yeah. Brandon, and on a sort of personal level, you were a pastor first before you got involved in a rescue mission. So like this question, what guided you into this whole sphere out of curiosity?
Yeah, so I just felt that you read through scripture and you see that Jesus was most passionate and served those that were most broken. Like he didn't come for those that were healthy; he came for those that were sick. So I wanted to get involved. And here's the mistake that I made that many make if they're not careful is I thought that I was going to enter into this work to help individuals. And ultimately, I ended up being the one getting the most help. I was able to reverse some of my most broken, I grew up with a father who was schizophrenic, bipolar, and, ended up with a lot of issues that I got to step into a rescue mission and help people who experienced the same issues my dad had. But ultimately, here's what I learned through that process that unfortunately, one of the mistakes that many make when want to jump in to help is we think we're there to bring the answers when ultimately that's not always the case. Sometimes we go there and we find the answers. And so my biggest advice to somebody wanting to get involved in rescue mission work is not try to figure out what it is that you have to bring to the table, but figure out how it is you can enter into community with probably some of the most amazing people on the planet. I'll just be as bold as say this. When I was running the rescue mission, I would often tell people I don't run a Christian entertainment business because sometimes people want to get involved and they'll come to a mission and they want to get involved because they think they're there to, show their kid what things could be different and all that. At the end of the day, what I had the privilege of running was a community of amazing people. And if you let yourself come into this community, not asking what can I bring to this community, but asking what can I come and learn from this community, God will use that in a way that you would have never imagined to not only see transformation happen in your life, but transformation happen in others' lives. When you read Ryan's book, here's going to be the theme you'll see. God used my most broken parts and he healed them through me helping other people walk through the same brokenness. We're all broken. We're all in need. And in my opinion, rescue missions is the best way for us to traverse our most broken parts. That's for everybody.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Brandon, for sharing that. Is there any closing thoughts that either one of you like to give us about rescue missions, philosophy of rescue missions, anything before we close this episode?
I appreciate you, brother. That's all I got.
Same here, man. Looking forward to hanging out with you soon.
Yep. Thanks for coming on.
Anytime, bro. Thanks for the invite.
See you, buddy.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks for joining us on the Miracle Hill podcast. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like, subscribe, and share on your platform of choice. You can also visit us on our website, miraclehill.org, to find out more about us and how you can support us in our mission. We can't wait for you to join us again next time.